In today's video, we're going to be setting 3 posts with decorative brackets in order to hold this LVL up for our shed roof coming off the back here. So we have 3 posts here. I believe they're evenly spaced. We'll check the print for that. But to get our first mark, we're going to pull a string line down the side of the house here. Now, this method works because we're in line with the side of the house. If you don't have a side of the house to flush up with, you can use 3, 4, 5 to come off the face to square up your location. So I'm using my square to hold the string off the house, and I'm sliding my square in until it just hits the edge of that sheeting. We don't want to wrap around the corner, we just want to bump slightly into the sheeting. Right about there looks good. So I'm going to make a placeholder mark here, just so I know where I'm at. Now that sheeting is a 1/2 inch thick, so we want to make sure to account for that and keep our post in line with the framing. So we'll move it in a 1/2 inch from where we were. So I just set my placeholder here. That was 3 inches on the square. Now if I go in a 1/2 inch from the outside of the square, because of the little thickness of this part here, we're coming back 2 11/16 to my mark. So if I line 2 11/16 up, the end of my tape is in line with the framing. A 1/2 inch further out, and that's in line with the sheeting where our string line was pulled. So we got our 5 1/2 on the inside of this post. This post is going to be overhanging just a 1/2 inch here, so that the edge of the post is in line with the edge of our framing, not the sheeting. Now we're going to go over here. Now we have 24 foot wide, and then we come back 5 1/2 to 23 6 1/2 right here. That's going to be the inside of our far post. Now we come to the center here. 12 foot is the center of 24. Now we take 5 1/2 divided by 2. That's 2 3/4. So I'm going to go 2 3/4 each way for this middle post here. So now we're going to be marking out the face or the back side of our posts. Now when you set your posts off your house, 9 out of 10 times you're going to be pulling directly off the framing. So if it's already sheeted, you're going to be ignoring that 1/2 inch completely. You're going to be subtracting it so that all of your framing is based off of the framing, never including the sheeting. But on this scenario, we're going to be pulling off of the sheeting because our wall is already sheeted and our ledger is going to go on top of the sheeting and our trusses are set to length. So we're going to be butting our tape into the sheeting on this one because that's where the trusses are butting into, and we want it to flush up on this side of the heel. So we're going to butt our tape in. I believe it's 12 feet to the face. We'll go back 5 1/2 and mark the inside of our post. We're going to do that on each side and then chalk a line in the middle so that middle post is perfectly in line. Good there? So based on our chalk line here, if we flush up the edge of our post with that, we're going to be overhanging quite a bit. Now on this project, I'm not a fan of this. And this goes back to pulling your post directly off of the framing. Now I messed up here and we should have put that LVL directly on the framing way before we sheeted it. That would have allowed our line to be back a 1/2 inch. Because our trusses, instead of butting into the sheeting, would have butted into the framing. That's just a good rule to follow all the time. In this scenario, we're going to go ahead and cut a 1/2 inch off the truss heels. This is not best practice. I do not recommend it. The only freaking reason I'm okay cutting a 1/2 inch off these truss heels is because we're not even close to this metal plate. So if we shrink these down, just going to move our subfascia in a 1/2 inch, and then we'll be able to get that bracket a 1/2 inch more in the concrete. Like I said, this is not best practice. We're just doing it because that LVL ledger got put on top of the sheeting and not tight to the framing. So we're going to go ahead and move this line out a 1/2 inch on all 3, and then we're going to set our post bracket right there. That way our post is mostly sitting on this concrete here and we're not going to be overhanging. With these decorative brackets, the post sits between these 2 inset parts here. You can see it's 5 1/2 on this. So we're flushing this to our new line right here. We're also going to be using this line here, the inside of the post, to kind of square up this bracket. And we're going to make a mark, and that's where we're going to drill our hole. Now I'm going to put 2 tap cones in, one in each of these holes, just so that when the post dries out, it doesn't ever spin this bracket. It's on here pretty tight, but when the post dries over time, it could spin this bracket. So right here, since we're using these red head bolt anchors, this part's sticking up. So we could either cut this off with a grinder or notch the bottom of the post. We'll just drill out the bottom of the post in the center. This reason is why I like using the Titan anchors for this instead of these red heads, but we'll make it work. So now that we got our brackets installed, we're good to get the post height for each of these posts. Now, if you have a run of 3 posts or more, best practice is to set the 2 outer posts, and then you either set the beam or string the middle so that you know an exact length for the middle post. If you get a measurement on each post, it's unlikely that it's going to line up. So if you have 1 beam running across, it might rock on that center post or it might be a little down. Now you can get it exact, but this is just how we do it. If there's 3 posts or more, set the 2 outer posts first, string the middle. Now that we're ready to get these post heights, we're gonna first understand where our post has to go to. So we have our ledger board up on the wall over there. Our trusses are notched and they're gonna be sitting on that ledger. And then the bottom of them is gonna be sitting on top of this beam here. So to understand how these elevations come together, I'm gonna hop onto the MyTech viewer. We have the 3D viewer here for this porch. And you can see that these trusses are sitting on this LVL with that notch. And then the bottom comes across, leveled over to the top of our beam. So the top of this LVL, that's 9.5 inches, is gonna have to be level with the bottom of that 9.5 inch LVL. So here we are on the LVL, and this top is gonna be level with that bottom over there. So our post is going to be notched right here to support the bottom of this LVL. And we're flushing it with this face because all our heels are going to sit flush on this edge. So since our post is 5.5 wide and our beam is 3.5 wide, we're going to wrap up the post up the back side of this LVL. That makes it way easier for the siders to finish this out. If they have their post coming up here, they can just butt their trim boards into each side. So if you can kind of imagine this post coming up here and being notched around this LVL. So another detail that we do that adds a lot of time is that we're gonna cut this LVL back, and we're gonna actually, on these 2 ends, we're gonna wrap the post not only up the back, but around the side. Now, when we wrap this post around, you'll see how we cut it out. But it takes a lot longer to cut this out. But since that rough cut wood comes up the side, it looks a lot nicer. So we got our laser up on the ledger there. Now that laser sits 3 inches above what it's sitting on. And we have to be 9.5 below the top of that LVL. So we're gonna measure over, and then we're gonna subtract 12.5 inches to get the top of this beam. So we got 132 3/4. So we got 132 3/4. We're subtracting 12.5 inches for the laser and the height of the LVL. So we get 10 feet and 1/4 inch. That's gonna be the top of our beam. So we got our posts here, and you always wanna check the bottom that you're pulling your measurement off for square. So when I'm cutting posts, I like to look at all the sides of the post to try and pick a nice side to either aim towards the house or aim out strategically. Sometimes these posts come discolored. We want to try and hide that either facing out or facing away from the doorway. So pulling off our square end, we have 10 foot and 1/4 to the top of our LVL. Now a cool trick for squaring around a post is only use 2 sides to put your square against. If you use these 2 opposite corners to square off of, you just move your square like that, and then you roll it, and then you line up your previous line off of this opposite edge, and then transfer it down. If you use these 2 opposite edges, you're way more likely to line up. It doesn't always work, but it's a cool trick. So now, since this is the top of our beam, we're gonna pull down 9.5, and that's gonna be where our beam sits. You can make this a 1/16 bigger so that the beam doesn't stick up too high. Now, this is the notch we're gonna make. We're gonna go 3.5 in, and then that back is gonna run up the back side of the LVL. For this notch here, since that's 3.5 2-ply, I'm gonna go 3 5/8 so that any growth we got, nailing them together, is still gonna keep us flush on this face here. So this part right here is what gets cut out, and that's where the LVL goes. Since this is the corner post, we're not gonna carry this notch all the way through. We're only gonna bring the beam in 3.5 inches this way as well. That's so that this nice rough cut wood over here caps the end of our LVL, and it's way easier to side. Okay, so we're cutting this part out right here. Now, that's a very difficult cut to make because we can't cut all the way through there. We're gonna have to use a chisel, but it makes it way nicer to look at, way easier to side. So there we have it. We got our notch. We're squared off so that we know we're gonna sit down tight to this. We were able to make this cut with a circular saw, Sawzall, and a wood chisel. So not too bad. Right on a rock. Okay, we'll need to use 2 people to get it perfect. So now we got our post braced and plumbed both ways. And you can see that notch now, how it sits, so that the LVL butts into the wood on both sides. The LVL is sitting flush with this side so that the heels of the truss sit flush with the face of the LVL. So now we're good to put in the rest of the screws in the post bracket, and then we'll do the same step for the other side. Okay, so we got our other post up. We got a notch on each end. So we're 24 outside to outside, and we got a 2-inch end cap of wood there. So we're gonna take 2 inches off of each end and set this beam up there. Then we'll have a nice straight line to measure up in the middle and cut that post exact. That middle post is just gonna wrap around the beam. It doesn't have to be notched. The reason we're taking 2 inches off of each side instead of 4 off one side is because we already marked this out for trusses when we marked out the ledger board for trusses. That way we could mark all 3 at the same time.
Right there.
5/8. Okay.
That was a really fun
Okay, so we got our 3 posts set. We got our beam up there. We're marked out for trusses and we're plumb on each side. So next we're gonna be setting trusses. Check out our video on that and our video on building gable ends on the ground. If you guys got any value out of this, subscribe to the channel because we're doing a video about every skill it takes to frame a house.